people of sounding the alarm regarding the unmanning, the emasculation, the feminizing, the disempowering of the Black man. A discourse that includes such luminaries as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing and Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu and Brother Dr. Nellie Fuller and so many others. The discourse on and the sounding the alarm regarding this country's obsessive unmanning of the Black male, we stand in a long tradition of that. But I did not know, and you did not know, that the obsession of this country to unman the Black male is so deep and goes so high that it has marshaled its best scientific minds. It has invested in its science and the Black man as its science experiment. This country has been and currently is engaged in a deliberate and even systematic scientific feminizing of the Black man and even homosexualizing of the Black man. And the two are not synonymous. So I thank the Honorable Brother Minister Louis Farrakhan for being that faithful and dutiful watchman on the wall, alerting Israel, the Black man and woman here in America, alerting Israel of the plots of our enemies. I would secondly like to thank Brother Burby Muhammad, the Student National Secretary of the Nation of Islam. I thank Brother Student National Secretary Burby for giving me the idea to go live with this subject. He gave me the subject, in fact, to discuss and the manner in which it would be effective that we discussed it. And I thank Brother Burby for that idea. And as you see, we are running with it. How to make a homosexual. Exposing scientific wickedness. You may ask, why do we take to these airways over the course of so many weeks with this subject in particular? That is a legitimate question. We have in our book, Understanding the Assault on the Black Man, Black Manhood, and Black Masculinity, we have gone in great depth with tremendous documentation demonstrating the various ways in which this society and this government, the government of America, is absolutely assaulting not just the Black man physically, but this society and this government is waging a multifaceted war against our manhood, not just our physical black bodies. It is waging war against our manhood and our masculinity. We have documented in over 400 pages the economic assault, social assault, the various ways in which this government, they say there's 6 million ways to die, and this government is deploying all 6 million of those ways to kill the black man, black manhood, and black masculinity. So we could discuss any number of those mechanisms by which this society is assaulting black manhood and masculinity. Why are we taking up this subject? It is because, family, friends, and others, I believe that this particular assault, or this particular manner of assault, the scientific feminizing and even scientific homosexualizing of the black community, I believe that it best illustrates 2 points. I believe that this example of the many examples of the assault on the black man brilliantly, most luminously illustrates 2 points critical for our consideration. One, it demonstrates that we cannot fathom the depth of Satan. This issue, this example, illustrates the evil of our enemy, the scientific manipulation of black sexuality, the scientific spawning of black homosexuality with an aim and objective. I believe that at the end of this 5-week journey, most will feel the weight, even the burden of this fact that you cannot fathom the depths of Satan. Now, for those who may be confused, let us be clear. When we in the Nation of Islam say Satan, we are not talking about a formless spirit. We are talking about a man, and in particular, we are talking about the white man, the Caucasian. This is the Satan whose depths of evil we cannot fathom. The second point that I believe this subject in particular illustrates is that most luminously and indisputably is this: that the white man absolutely is the enemy of the black man. The scientific engagements that we will illustrate and document, and the reasons for which they were and are done, makes it unmistakable that the black man and the white man cannot live in peace, because the white man has absolutely demonstrated himself to be not just the enemy of the black man, but the mortal enemy of the black man. What does mortal enemy imply? A mortal enemy is content with nothing less than the death of his enemy. And that, family, is the situation that we find ourselves in today in 2017, as much as we did in 1555. I believe our unpacking of this scientific assault, this scientific wickedness, I believe it nicely, perfectly illustrates that the Caucasian white man is capable of evil that most of us can't fathom, and that he delights in engaging in that evil against the black man and woman in America, and thus is our mortal enemy. I know that we have white viewers and white listeners, and that is good. We welcome you, and we want to reason with you as we want to reason with our own people. You need to have an understanding of what is happening to your black neighbor. And if it is your sentiment as you are listening to me right now, if my words provoked in you when you heard me say that the Caucasian white man is the mortal enemy of black people, if hearing this disturbed you and compelled from you the reaction that not all whites, well, maybe, but if you are such an exception, then you have an obligation to fight against what we are going to put before you today. You have an obligation to marshal your forces, whatever they may be, to bring an end to the scientific genocide that the U.S. government and her affiliate scientists are engaged in right now as we speak. If you are not among those whites who are guilty of being an enemy of black people, then you have a duty first to try to understand what we are presenting today, and then take what you hear and use your white privilege to bring an end to this black genocide. We will, dear family, just lay a base tonight. We are not saying everything tonight. This is a 5-week journey, inshallah. We only hope this evening to lay a base. It will be a scientific base by necessity. If you have a low tolerance for scientific discussion, well, my condolences to you. This is not how you would probably want to spend your Tuesday evenings. For this is a scientific war, and we must understand the science of it in order to be able to acknowledge it. So we are going to talk a lot of science. If Allah pleases, we will go slow and we will simplify it as best we can. And so from that, you will say, well, brother Dr. Wesley, are you a scientist to be able to engage in this discourse, to be able to offer this presentation? I read your comments and critiques, and in most cases, you're trolling. But that is an appropriate question. We will talk a lot about physiology. Are you a biological scientist, brother Dr. Wesley? No, I am not. We will talk much about pharmacology. Are you a pharmacologist, brother Dr. Wesley? No, I am not. The doctor in my name is authentic, but it doesn't imply MD, it implies PhD. While I'm not a professional scientist in that sense, I am a professional and professionally trained scholar. But tonight, I am coming before us, not just in the capacity of a scholar, but I'm going to play the role of a prosecuting attorney. Those of you who are into law or who are lawyers are into the legal profession, you know that when a case is being prosecuted, the prosecuting attorney, him or herself, does not have to be the expert and the authority on the various sciences that bear on the case being presented. The prosecutor will, his case or her case will likely rest on any number of sciences for which he or she is not trained. But a lawyer knows how to, while he or she is not the expert, the authority in the various sciences, the lawyer knows how to identify the qualified authority in the various sciences that impinges on his case. And so the prosecuting attorney will subpoena the scientific experts. And so that expert testimony is brought to bear on the case, even though the prosecutor of the case is not such an expert. That is the case here. While I am not expert in the various scientific fields that we will engage over these 5 weeks. As a prosecuting attorney, I have subpoenaed such experts. I published earlier, for your benefit, a bibliography of sources. You want to know what are my sources, and you are right in that. And so we published in advance of our demonstration this evening on our Facebook page, Dr. Wesley Muhammad and Wesley Muhammad, a bibliography of sources that I have subpoenaed and that you all can cross-examine. You can vet. I am not the expert, but we are leaning on the expert testimony of those qualified authorities, and we have provided you with our list of witnesses and invite you to cross-examine them to vet our sources. The bibliography that we have shared this evening is very selective, very small, and it's only for this opening statement, if you will, tonight. But it's sufficient, I believe, for you to understand that we are not before you faking jacks, false flagging, claiming to be what we are not. I am a professional scholar who understands scientific and scholarly method by Allah's grace and employs that scientific method and scholarly practice in every subject that I engage, and not excluding this subject. But tonight and for the next 5 weeks, we are before us as a prosecuting attorney, laying a very specific charge against the United States government and affiliate sympathetic scientists. The charge is that in an aspect of its overall plot of genocide against the Black man and woman in America, this government has deliberately, scientifically spawned the phenomenon of Black male feminization, Black female masculinization, and the homosexualization of the Black community. Forgive us as we have a lot of moving parts. And there are those who may believe that we are barking at a mirage, that there is no such phenomenon, that we are giving disproportionate time and attention to a very minimal or incidental phenomenon. We beg to differ. In 2012, Gallup conducted its largest poll yet on the LGBTQ community. And they found, quote, that white people are less likely to be gay. Poll reveals African American community has highest percentage of LGBT disproportion. In 1992, in Washington, D.C., there was the first gay Black Pride event. The jump off for the gay Black Pride movement on that day, it is reported that somewhere of 800 participants showed up. 800 in 1992. From that day to this, gay Black Pride events draw over 300,000 participants. That is a tremendous roller coaster. That is, in fact, a phenomenon, and these 1 million LGBT black folk. That's just the homosexual element. If we were to include feminized but not homosexual, we will elaborate on that distinction. Just because, brother, you're not sleeping with a man doesn't mean you're not feminized. We, inshallah, will go into that. But if we add to the 1 million black, lesbian, gays, bisexual, and transgender, 1 million of God's people, if we add to that the feminized but maybe not yet gay numbers, then you would have to admit that we have a bona fide phenomenon on our hands. And it is most remarkable that we black people, the people of God, outnumber whites. Slide, please. Outnumber whites. I'm gonna have you, if you can. It is a very curious phenomenon that in 2013 and today, the proportion of black gays is higher than the proportion of white gays, because gay homosexuality can in fact be described as very much a white thing. Historically speaking, homosexuality is very much a white thing. Now, that is not to say that there has never been a black homosexual independent of the influence of white people. We don't make such claim. In the long history of the black man and woman on this planet, this is our planet. We have been here long, long, long before the first white man ever stepped foot on the earth. And in that time, there are individuals who have engaged in everything. So what do we mean then when we say homosexuality can and should be understood as very much a white thing? It is because, wow, there have been individuals in the black world who engaged in such behavior. Such behavior was always considered communally, culturally considered unnatural, deviant, and wrong. So where such behavior did show itself, the community and the culture rejected it. But with white people, historically, they have shown throughout history that homosexuality is communally and culturally not just accepted, but preferable. You should avail yourselves, excuse me, dear family, to Professor Craig Williams' Roman homosexuality. The crown jewel of Western civilization historically, or the crown jewels the Greek and Roman Empire and cultures were homosexual cultures. Homosexuality was a part of the etiquette, the way of Greece and Rome. But that's not just an historical footnote of ancient history. Avail yourself, family, to this very robust book by Professor Robert Aldrich, Colonialism and Homosexuality. And you will see that the whole enterprise of European expansion was a homosexual enterprise. The colonies that the European powers established throughout the world, in Africa, in Asia, in India, the Isles of the Pacific, and in the Western Hemisphere here. These colonies were homosexual playgrounds, not just for the lowly man, but for the architects of the colonial enterprise. Nor did it stop there. You should avail yourself to Jane Ward's Not Gay: Sex Between Straight White Men, wherein she documents, quote, straight men, specifically white men, having sex with other men to affirm just how straight they are. Because to be straight and still be able to perform gay sex while always remaining uninterested is the height of white masculinity. Indeed, it is. The homosexual act, or say it better, white masculinity, from yesterday to today, has always been predicated upon the homosexual act. White masculinity has always been, in many ways, defined by the homosexual act. Homosexuality is very natural to the white male. This is true. So when we say, as we do, that homosexuality, that we in the Nation of Islam, under the divine leadership and guidance of the Honorable Brother Minister Louis Farrakhan, who sits among us today in the seat of that black God that you see peering over my shoulder, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We in the Nation of Islam, we understand homosexuality, and we are opposed to homosexuality because we understand homosexuality is unnatural. However, it's not unnatural for white people. It's unnatural for black people. Homosexuality is unnatural for the black man and woman, while it has proven to be quite natural for white people. And this is why the prophets that were sent to them, white people, came and had to condemn homosexuality. Religion had to check homosexuality among white people. We didn't, the 10 Commandments did not come to black people. The laws of God, the laws of religion, the thou shalt nots, that didn't come to black people. That was sent to white people. Religion had to get white people, check white people against their own nature, natural inclination. single image that I hope will stay with you throughout our 5 or so weeks together, if Allah blesses us with that. It is this image of this gestating black baby, this black male fetus in the womb of his mother. Keep that image in your mind as we go on this journey. How does our enemy target the masculinity of the black male in the very womb of his mother? How is this done? Scientifically. In order to understand this, there's some science we just have to understand, and chief among that is we have to understand the endocrine system. The endocrine system is a system of glands in the human body. These glands secrete chemicals, hormones. The endocrine system is distinguished by the fact that these glands secrete its hormones directly into the bloodstream. Now, the endocrine system, it would be good that maybe you, the listening audience, will have notes and write these things down, because the base that we are laying today, the scientific base we are laying today in this episode 1, lays the base of everything that we say the 4 subsequent weeks, and we will constantly and consistently refer back to this science. So if you need to get pen and paper and take notes, then that would be advisable. The endocrine system, the glands, that secretes its hormones, and hormones are chemical messengers, the body's chemical messengers. Endocrine system, the system of glands, is the body's communication network. And the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands in particular are the command center of the endocrine system. That is very important. I will come back to the hypothalamus, one of the glands that is the command center to this endocrine system, which can be described as the body's communication network. The hormones that are secreted by these glands, they are chemical messengers that regulate the functions of the body. They are responsible, some of these hormones are responsible, for example, for sexual differentiation, the process by which a fetus becomes either a male or a female. These hormones are largely responsible for those processes, because sexual differentiation are very delicate processes that are tightly controlled and exquisitely sensitive to minute changes in hormone concentrations. This we must understand. The process of sexual differentiation in the womb, the processes by which a fetus becomes a male infant or female infant, that process, these are very delicate process controlled tightly by the secretion of these hormones. And the slightest changes in these hormones disrupts those processes of sexual differentiation. The two most important of these hormones, these chemical messengers, most important for our discussion, are testosterone and estrogen. Estrogen, the female hormone that guides and shapes physical femininity, that helps guide and shape not just the reproductive system of the female, but estrogen sculpts physiological femininity, so-called secondary features of femininity, the distribution of fat in the body, the curvature of a female body in contrast to a male body. Estrogen does that with progesterone and others, but primarily estrogen. Testosterone, that most important male hormone. It is so important. And we will speak so much about it, largely because the general population has such a trivial and deceptive understanding or misunderstanding of testosterone. And we were deliberately given this misunderstanding. Testosterone is so important. Testosterone is not primarily a libido hormone for males. Its significance for us in this discussion are two. Testosterone is the paintbrush, the chemical paintbrush, or the chemical scalpel, better, that scalps the masculinity in the womb. And without the right amount of testosterone, that fetus that is supposed to grow into a male because his chromosomes were X and Y. So that X and Y fetus should grow into a male baby. If there are not adequate supplies of testosterone, that fetus will be demasculinized, and will its body and its brain will default into a feminine form. So testosterone and the right levels of testosterone is absolutely necessary to produce physical masculinity of a male baby. And the absence or a deficiency in testosterone will produce femininity, a physiological and neurological femininity in that baby. The second important point about testosterone is that it is not the libido hormone, it is the power hormone. Testosterone shapes the body and the brain of the male fetus. Testosterone masculinizes the body and the brain of the male fetus, and it compels that male to engage in the quintessential masculine endeavor. And what is the quintessential masculine endeavor? It is the pursuit of power. The quintessential masculine endeavor is the pursuit of power. Man is God. Specifically, I'm sorry to my non-black, no, I'm sorry, but I guess my condolences to our non-black audience. But the black man is God. The black man, the black male, is and has been the highest form of existence on this planet and in this cosmos. This is a fact. What is God? God is a being of power and force. Power is the signature, the definition of God. And God is a man. God is the black man. So the very definition of man is power. So the quintessential pursuit of manhood is power, but not evil power, righteous power. Both God and Satan are powerful. Both God and Satan, or God and Satan, are possessors of power. The difference in them is how they execute, how they acquire, and how they execute their power. God exercises power righteously with justice. Satan exercises power wickedly with lies and injustice. So God is power, man is God, and it is testosterone that produces the physical and neurological masculinity in the womb. And it's testosterone that drives that masculine being once he's in the world and throughout his life, drives that masculine being along its natural pursuit as a masculine being, the pursuit of power. Now, understand, their family, here we go. We said that the endocrine system the system of these glands that secretes these hormones, these chemical messengers directly into the bloodstream so that it can do what it do. This endocrine system is the body's communication network, and the command center of the endocrine system is the hypothalamus. This hypothalamus is very important. Testosterone masculinizes the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus partially controls who we are sexually attracted to. Obviously, both males and females have a hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus controls partly who we are sexually attracted to. The more testosterone that the hypothalamus is exposed to, the more the hypothalamus sets the stage for a sexual inclination towards women. It is necessary for the body, the male fetus's body, to produce enough testosterone. And it is necessary for the fetus's brain to be able to absorb the requisite amount of testosterone in order for the brain to develop along masculine and heterosexual lines. If that male fetus, for any number of reasons, accidental or deliberate, if that male fetus finds itself testosterone deficient, if its gonads, its testes, are unable to produce the right amount of testosterone, and if the brain of the fetus is, for whatever reason, natural or deliberate, the brain is unable to absorb sufficient amounts of testosterone, then the body and the brain will feminize by default. And this is why women, they're a natural woman. Her hypothalamus inclines her to sexual attraction towards men, not women, because she naturally does not produce, even though women produce minimal amounts of testosterone, women don't produce the requisite amount of testosterone to masculinize the hypothalamus. I hope that makes sense. Why is that? That is important. You will see as we go that by pharmacologically disturbing the pharmacologically, by using drugs to disturb the interaction between testosterone and the developing brain, you can feminize the male brain. I'm going to say that again. By intervening into, or by disturbing the process by which testosterone interacts with the brain of the male fetus by disturbing that process, you can feminize the brain of that male fetus. Now, I said, understand, there are many of you out there who have been throwing remote controls at your computer, probably, because you are so offended by the very thought of physical gender. You are one of those who believe that gender is strictly a social construct. You bought the lie of the white feminists. So you believe that human beings are naturally gender neutral, and gender doesn't go beyond the clothes one wears or the social norms that a human comports with by imposition. Bless your hearts. You are wrong, family. Gender is very real. It's very innate, and not just physical sexuality. Those of you who believe that humans are naturally gender neutral, you will concede to physical gender differentiation, but you believe that it stops, sexual differentiation stops with the reproductive systems, that the level of cleavage, if you will, between the male and the female, the Quran says men are not like women and women are not like men. That is true, not just for our bodies, but this is a very important point. And you, many of you, well, don't like it, but it is a fact. Male brain and female brain are not the same. Now, this doesn't speak to cognition or cognitive abilities. That's not what we are talking about. The female brain and the male brain are very different. The differences are physical. The differences are chemical. The differences are neurological. And this is important because testosterone is required to produce the male brain, and in the absence of testosterone, or by the lack of the required amounts of testosterone, the male brain will default to a female brain. Now, with that being said, let me clear something up real quick, because what we just said can probably lend itself to some misunderstanding and even mischief making. Family, we did not start life as female. I'm going to say that again. The human, well, hold on, I want you to see us as we. We did not start life, family, in the womb of our mother as female. It was once believed scientifically that that was the case. And it is still popularly believed today that that is the case, that life in the womb begins as female and through certain processes becomes male or stays female. In 2017, we know and must say that that is simply wrong. That is no longer a scientifically viable or truthful claim. Female is the default form, that is true. But female is not the first form. And while those two may seem synonymous, they are very different. The brain and the body will masculinize only if exposed to the necessary amount of testosterone. If it doesn't, if it's not exposed to the right amount of testosterone, that power hormone, then it will default as female. Yes. A man with no power, a man with inadequate power hormone is feminized. A man with no power is a feminized man. If the brain is not exposed to the right amount of that power hormone, it will default into female. That is true. But it is not true that the first form that life takes in the womb is female. That is not so at all. We know that first life form in the womb is not, it can be described either as gender neutral or as bipotential. Whether that fetus is XX or XY. That initial fetus for the first 5 or 6 weeks of gestation, they are bipotential, meaning both embryos. The embryo is neither anatomically or hormonally male or female, but that fetus, whether it's XX or XY, it possesses both. It possesses both the female Mullerian duct and the male Wolffian duct. This is why that initial fetus is called bipotential. It possesses both ducts, the XX and the XY. It has the equipment of both the male and the female, not just the female, and the male came later. That initial embryo has both the Mullerian and the Wolffian ducts, has both the male and the female equipment. So what happens? its gonads, those initial gonads. They're just what they call gonadal ridges. They're not ovaries and they're not testes yet. How does that change? That changes by the work of, and is determined by the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome, after 6 weeks, sends down a gene, the sex determining gene. And that sex determining gene causes the gonads that are currently neutral, they're not ovaries or testes, that SYR or sex determining gene stimulates the development of those gonads into testes. In the testes, now developed, testosterone is produced. That testosterone, newly produced, goes into action. It acts on the Wolffian duct and facilitates the Wolffian duct becoming the male reproductive organs. The testes also release another hormone, an anti-Müllerian hormone. What this anti-Müllerian hormone does is it causes the female duct, the Müllerian duct, to disappear. So what started as not female, as bipotential with both male and female ducts, under the agency of that testosterone, the male duct, the Wolffian duct, becomes male reproductive organs, and the female duct disappears. On the other side, in female fetuses, XX fetuses, there is no testosterone, so they are not sculpted by testosterone in a masculine form. However, there are genes on the X chromosome of the female that goes into action that needs to promote ovarian development and suppress the masculinizing program, the masculinizing genes that are in the female must be suppressed and silenced. The absence of testosterone that will activate them is part of that process, but also there are certain genes in females that have to actively suppress masculinization in the female. This is very important. Because see, if you, family, if we believe that the female brain is in the female form is the natural, is the original form of that human life, then you would say feminizing after the fact the masculine brain is only returning it to its natural and original state. And this is how some of you justify and apologize and embrace transgenderism and the feminizing of your men. But the female form and the female brain is not the beginning of life. It doesn't life. The male in the womb does not start his journey as a female, nor does the female in the womb start her journey as female. They both start as bipotential. And what makes the difference between female and between masculinization and feminization, what makes the difference is that is the presence or absence of that testosterone. Because even in XY fetuses that should be male because it has an X and Y chromosome, they can be born with a totally female physiology. And what determines that is the presence or absence of this testosterone. Testosterone is so important to our discussion, so important to understanding the assault on the black man, black manhood, and black masculinity. I'm almost where we want to be. Close out this first episode. Laying the base for our future discussions on how the U.S. government and its affiliate scientists are deliberately feminizing and homosexualizing the black man. If it can be said that there is one individual who laid the scientific base, created the template for the science that will be used and weaponized against black men. If there is one scientist who can hold such distinction, I would offer Dr. Günther Dorn, an East German scientist, a European pioneer of neuroendocrinology. What is neuroendocrinology? The neuroendocrine system is the complex unity of the nervous system on one hand and the endocrine system on the other. These two systems are connected or interconnected through neurotransmitters and hormones. It was Dr. Günther Dorn who pioneered neuroendocrinology. From 1962 to 1997, Dr. Dorner was director of the Institute of Experimental Endocrinology of the Charité Berlin Hospital in Berlin. He has authored over 400 original papers in professional journals. Dr. Dorner, as I stated, he created the template, the scientific template, or the template for the science that is currently used against the black man in our masculinity today. From there, are you able to guide it from there?
Change it.
This is taking too long. Unlike the
Over
mouse. Yeah. For me in the corner. There we go. Dr. Dorner's work generated the turning point of our understanding of the effect of environment and environmental factors on sexual orientation. It was Dorner's studies that revealed the importance of the critical period, that the period between 4 and 7 months of pregnancy. It was Dr. Dorner's studies who revealed the importance of this critical period when sexual differentiation is taking place. Dr. Dorner's animal experiments showed that deliberate and experimental reduction of testosterone by creating or inducing an androgen or testosterone deficiency, by deliberately creating a deficiency in testosterone during that critical period of 4 to 7 months of sexual determination, that this can produce homosexual behavior later in adult life.
The flies over.
Just FYI, I hate this mouse. Among Dr. Dorner's many important studies, listen to this: induction and prevention of male homosexuality by androgen. Androgen is a general category of male hormones, the most important of which is testosterone. So androgen just means male hormone. In 1968, he reported on his laboratory experiments at how he was able to induce and prevent male homosexuality he can induce male homosexuality by creating testosterone deficiency, and he was able to experimentally prevent male homosexuality by securing the right amounts of testosterone in the experimental animals. Also in 1968, on the bottom, his study hormonal induction and prevention of female homosexuality. As far back as 1968, it was known how to scientifically induce male and female homosexuality in the laboratory by manipulating testosterone levels, testosterone and estrogen levels. From as far back as 1968, homosexuality could be artificially induced. Dr. Dorner mapped out the two-step process. The two-step process of this experiment, this artificial or deliberate homosexualization. That two-step process is one, the first step, cause an androgen or testosterone deficiency during that critical period, prenatal period of 4 to 7 months. And this will feminize centers in the hypothalamus, the command center of the endocrine system, the hypothalamus. In 1968, Dr. Dorner was able to demonstrate scientifically, experimentally, that if you cause testosterone deficiency in that critical period of 4 to 7 months pregnancy, that would feminize the hypothalamus. And step two is later in adult life, expose that person or being to estrogen, the female hormone. So in the womb, you deliberately reduce testosterone levels that will feminize certain centers in the brain of that male fetus. And then later in life, if he is exposed to estrogen, the female hormone, he can be a homosexual phenotype, what they call it. Homosexual phenotype can be triggered. My. This is the template. And again, I hope you have the image of that black fetus in the womb of this mother. I hope you have that in your mind right now. The two-step process, the template that was laid and is systematically and deliberately operationalized today against black men in America in particular. That two-step process caused testosterone deficiency while in the womb, feminizing brain centers, and then later in life, make sure they're exposed to estrogen. That's the two-step process in this government that was laid down as early as 1968. The two-step process to spawn the black homosexual and feminizing phenomenon, and it is the very process that this government is using against the black man and woman in America. Allow me to read follow me if you would. During the intrauterine period, the period in the womb. During the intrauterine period, the fetal brain develops in the male direction through a direct action of testosterone on the developing nerve centers, or in the female direction through the absence of this hormone surge. In this way, our gender identity and sexual orientation are programmed into our brain structures when we are still in the womb. However, since sexual differentiation of the genitals takes place in the first 2 months of pregnancy, and sexual differentiation of the brain starts in the second half of pregnancy, these two processes can be influenced independently, which may result in transsexuality. Did you hear what we said? Professor Dick Schwab, associate, sexual differentiation of the human brain in relation to gender identity and sexual orientation. Because the developments of physical gender, the testes or the ovaries, because they take place at one time and only at a later time does neurological sexual differentiation take place, or in other words, the gonads become sexually distinct or sexually differentiated at one period, and it's only much later that the brain becomes sexually differentiated. This circumstance means that both processes can be deliberately influenced independently, meaning even after the male genitals develop and physiological gender has been secured, neurological gender can be altered. They can produce in the lab deliberately a baby born with a male body and a female brain. I probably don't need to repeat that. The weight of that, I'm sure you feel. A sex difference in the human brain and its relation to transsexuality. See, this is what I have called scientific transgenderism. That is transgenderism, transsexuality that is deliberately, scientifically induced. Now, the basis of scientific transgenderism is this fact that discordance between physical gender and brain gender can be produced. So it is possible for there to be produced discordance between genetic sex and physiological or gonadal sex, meaning it's possible that an XY baby can be born with a vagina, or what approaches a vagina. It is possible for an XX baby, chromosomally a female, to be born with a penis or approaching a penis. So there's discordance there between, or disagreement between chromosomal sex and physiological sex, genetic sex and physiological sex. They also can produce discordance between physiological sex and brain sex. In other words, a baby can be born with a masculinized body and a feminized brain. Because the processes of masculinizing the body takes place at one period, and the processes of masculinizing the brain takes place at another period. After the body has been masculinized by the testosterone, the process can be interfered with and the brain can be feminized by an absence or a diminishing of testosterone. The process by which, the scientific process by which, or a critical piece of the scientific process by which this is done, is through epigenetics. I'm almost done, family. Bear with me just a little, couple more slides, and the base will have been laid. Epigenetics. You need to know epigenetics. Epigenetics refers to the epigenome. What is that? The genome, as most of us know, the genome is our complete assembly of DNA. That's a genome, the complete assembly of DNA. The epigenome is the assembly of chemical compounds. Chemical compounds that can tell the genome what to do and how to do it. Our DNA contains instructions for building every part of our body. Now, DNA is wrapped around proteins called histones. Those are those green things right there. These histones are proteins around which DNA coils. When those histones are tightly wrapped around, or when DNA tightly wraps around those proteins called histones, those green things right there, when the DNA tightly wraps around these histones, the DNA is inactive and unreadable. That DNA is inactive. It can't express itself. It can't act on any instructions or do anything. When the DNA, however, is loosely wrapped around the histone, then that DNA is readable and active. The DNA and the histones together are covered with chemical tags called marks. Those are the red things you see right there, those red balls. Very, very important to the scientific basis that we are laying to understand the deliberate scientific feminization and homosexualization of the Black community. Those red balls that you see, they are chemical compounds called marks. They sit on top, above. They sit on top of the unit, the DNA histone unit. These marks are chemical tags that influence how genes are expressed. It's those red balls, it's these marks that have the power to influence how the genes are expressed. If genes are instruction books, marks direct how those instructions are carried out. It's these chemicals, the marks, that determines when, where, how much, how little of the gene is expressed. These marks can control the volume of the gene. It can determine whether the gene is expressed intensely or the gene is expressed minimally. It can be said that genetics loads the gun, epigenetics pulls the trigger. Why is this important? Why is this epigenome? The chemicals, these chemical compounds that sit on top of the genome and influence how genes express themselves. How intense, how damp, how loud, how soft. Why is this important to our discussion? Because epigenetic mechanisms are involved in sexual differentiation of the brain. Quote, evidence has accumulated to show that epigenetic regulation is involved in the control of sexual differentiation of the brain. How does that play itself out? So it's not just the genes that are involved in masculinizing or feminizing. It's these chemical tags that sit on top of genes that play an important role in sexual differentiation of the brain. Back up. As we said, when there are a lot, this is how it's done. When there are a lot of these red balls, I want to go back to that. When there is a lot of these red balls, these marks, that means the histones are wrapped tightly by the DNA, which means gene expression is inhibited, it's suppressed. The more marks, the more those red balls, the less genes are expressed. The fewer the red balls, the fewer the chemical tags, the fewer the marks, the more genes are able to express themselves. I hope that is clear. Is that clear? That is why this is so significant. Among the things that those red balls do, those chemical compounds sitting on top of DNA and histones, these epimarks are believed to be able to determine how much or how little testosterone a brain can absorb. These epimarks can alter how cells respond to androgen or testosterone signaling. It's very important. So you manipulate the epigenome. You will manipulate the number and the type of those epimarks. You can manipulate how genes express themselves. Those epimarks, those red balls, are critical to the maintenance of femininity. Why? Those epimarks suppress masculinizing genes, genes that, if expressed, will contribute to the masculinizing program of the body. Both males and females have these masculinizing genes. In males, they are turned on. In females, they are turned off. It's those red balls that turn them on or turn them off. The more red balls, the more epimarks, then the less those genes, masculinizing genes, express themselves. So a sufficient amount of epimarks is necessary to maintain feminization, because a sufficient amount of those epimarks are necessary to prevent masculinizing genes from expressing themselves. On the other hand, let me back up. This is how the Black woman can be masculinized: by limiting, by reducing the number of these epimarks, by deliberately or accidentally, but deliberately reducing a female's number of epimarks. That frees masculinizing genes to express themselves, and thus produce, the more masculinizing genes express themselves, the more the female becomes man-like in brain structure and behavior. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, males do not want a lot of epimarks, because too many epimarks will start interfering with the expression of their masculinizing genes. So if you artificially or deliberately increase the number of epimarks in a male fetus, for example, you can suppress masculinizing genes and therefore interrupt the masculinizing program of that male fetus. You understand what we are saying? And the reason that is important, because the reason epigenetics is important as a scientific base for our discussion how to make a homosexual, because epigenetics, these epimarks can program the brain in such a way that these chemicals can modify DNA expression in such a way that we now know can produce homosexuality. So by manipulating these epimarks, by manipulating the epigenome, these chemical tags that sit atop DNA, by manipulating them, or by the causing, accidental or otherwise, the causing of disturbances in the epigenome, homosexuality can be produced. Homosexuality as a consequence of epigenetically canalized sexual development. Now, we're landing. Time magazine. January 6, 2010. They did an important cover story on the science of epigenetics. And they shared the basis of what we shared, the basis of the science of epigenetics, but here they make a very important, really stunning observation or confession. John Cloud, who wrote the article, see why your DNA isn't your destiny. The new science of epigenetics reveals how the choices you make can change your genes and those of your kids. Black people, you should never use kids. Just I'm gonna detour because I hate that every time a kid is a baby goat. And goats are not pleasant animals. And if you call your children kids and they act like goats, then it ain't their fault, it's your fault. You define them as baby goats. When they act like baby goats, don't blame them, blame yourself. Your children are children. But John Cloud says in this article on the science, new science of epigenetics, he reports some good news. Tom reports some good news. What is the good news, Tom? The good news is that scientists are learning to manipulate epigenetic marks in the lab, which means they are developing drugs that treat quote unquote illnesses simply by silencing bad genes and jump starting good ones. Ya Allah. Let me unpack this for us. There's certain things you have to understand when you read that. We are not just reading a confession that scientists, or what is the significance of this confession? That scientists are learning to manipulate, deliberately manipulate the epigenetic marks, the epimarks, those chemical tags that turn genes on and off, that determine how genes are expressed. Scientists are learning to manipulate these chemical marks in the lab. For what? For what purpose? Which means they are, with that knot, they are developing drugs, pharmaceuticals, to do what? To treat illnesses. As you will, inshallah, learn in the next couple weeks, after the riots in Watts in 1965, and then in Detroit in 1967, and then in 100 cities in 1968, Black masculine anger, which was at the root of those urban uprisings, Black masculine anger was pathologized. It was defined as an illness, what they call a protest psychosis. Black male anger was defined and treated as a bona fide illness that this country was determined to remedy, to medicate. And so many of the drugs, the Ritalins, the Prozacs, these drugs, these psychotropic drugs, grow out of the government's interest in medicating the Black masculine pathology or illness called protest psychosis. The sickness of the Black male that makes him rise up to fight for justice violently. That was defined as an illness. And so scientists who are able to manipulate epigenetic marks in the lab and produce drugs that can manipulate these marks by doing what? These drugs can make these epimarks silence bad genes. In the case of the Black male, the bad genes are the masculinizing genes, because Black masculinity is the enemy of the United States government. Since 1965 to this day, masculinity, Black male masculinity versus Black female masculinity and versus Black male femininity, Black male masculinity has been the enemy of this government since 1965. So bad genes in Black men are genes that masculinize. And by manipulating, these scientists know how to manipulate these epimarks in order to silence such bad genes. Turn off masculinizing genes in Black babies through drugs, pharmaceuticals. They know how to jumpstart good genes, genes that promote feminization in men. They can do that. And as I close, of course, I cannot not bring it home to you weed smokers. And y'all so excited about me these days. We are going to have a lot to say about marijuana coming up, including this Saturday. In fact, here in Chicago, we will give the address where you can join us and question us about our claims for marijuana. But this is important here. Epigenetic imprint and its legacy cannabis's epigenetic imprint and its legacy on brain and behavior. Cannabis, marijuana, impacts the epigenome. Marijuana disturbs, alters the epigenome, these epigenetic tags. Cannabis exposure during sensitive periods of development can impact epigenetic mechanisms, leading to persistent gene regulation and behavioral alterations. Cannabis exposure during sensitive periods of development can impact epigenetic mechanisms. The epigenome that controls how genes are expressed, the weed you smoke, can impact those chemical tags, those chemical on-off switches, and lead to gene regulation and behavioral alterations. The two most likely populations to use cannabis today are pregnant women and adolescents. These developmental phases also correspond to periods when the brain is most vulnerable to the influence of external cannabinoids, the chemicals in cannabis, interfering with epigenetic mechanisms. The chemicals in cannabis, the chemicals in the weed that you smoke, can interfere with the epigenetic mechanisms that determine how genes are expressed. The accumulating data indicate epigenetic disturbances in human subjects relevant to cannabis use disorder. Let me say this, man. When I set out to disabuse academically in a scholarly fashion Black people of what I consider are false gods. Black people, whether in the church or the masjid, we love the spook god. And so my scholarly work set out to go to war with the spook god that got Black folks so messed up. But I learned something. The biggest god of Black people isn't the spook god. The biggest god of Black people isn't Jesus Christ. I academically have been deconstructing another false idol, if you will. The myth of the African matriarchal mother goddess. The Black woman is a god. But this particular myth that we have been deconstructing is the myth that the God, the first God and the supreme God, is an African woman. And this is what Black people, before white people came to us, this is what we believed and have been worshiping. Well, I've been, disabusing us of that academically. That's just a myth. I thought the African matriarchal mother god was a big god for Black people, because Black folks got mad at me. They get mad at me when I talk about the falsity of that African matriarchal mother god. But I have to tell you, I now know for certainty who the biggest god of black people is. It's weed. Marijuana is black folks' god. The so-called Negro in America. Weed is the biggest god to black people. How do we know that? Man, we don't fight as violently, as passionately, but any other guy, we don't, the way y'all are mad at me for this weed, y'all ain't come at me like this when I was deconstructing the white man, Christianity, the white man's religion, and disabusing us of our errant views of that white Christ. Y'all love that white Jesus, but y'all don't love him as much as y'all love that weed, that white joint. Y'all love that white joint way more than you love that white Jesus, because you fight for that white joint with an intensity that you don't fight for any other God. So it is official. The official God of the Negro, the biggest, most important God of the Negro is that weed. Y'all getting at me something awful with an intensity that I have never seen, but that's fine. We keep doing what we do. And we're going to end tonight doing what we do, and we will be back at it for around 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, or however long this thing goes till we impeach, overthrow the false gods that are part of the assault against the black man by our enemy. And yes, the weed culture in the black community is absolutely the deliberate tool of our enemy to unman the black man. So I'm gonna end on that note and invite you family to join us Saturday. This Saturday, July 15th. We're in Chicago. You're in the Chicago area. Come out to 10340 Southwestern Ave, Suite 2B, Chicago, Illinois. We are going further into the assault on the black man, and we are going to address some of the comments that we made on our Breakfast Club interview that got so many of you riled up and upset with us. We're going to elaborate on some of those. We are going to talk about weed and Molly. Those of you who thought I misspoke on the Breakfast Club and my references to weed and Molly in this history, well, come out and bring your questions or incredulity with you. This Saturday, July 15th. Part 2 of this series, How to Make a Homosexual, the basis of which we just laid. Part 2 will be next Tuesday. Join us next Tuesday as we go deeper in the demonstration that the basis that we just laid out, the science that we just laid out, our enemies, the government has absolutely weaponized this science against the black man and woman in America. For the next 4 weeks, we will provide the documentation, we will elaborate, we will make the case for those who want the larger context to this assault. my book, 400 pages document. You can avail yourself to it at www.drwesleymuhammad.info. I pray that this was helpful for you in laying the base of how this government is in the business of manufacturing homosexuals, and their prize product is the black homosexual. That's this government's prized product. So thank you for your time, family, friends, and all listeners. I pray that we see you again on this broadcast next Tuesday, same time. Well, not the same time, because we were very late because of the technological aspects here, but we will, inshallah, have those worked out. And on that note, let me close in thanking my brother Troy 5X, without whom none of this could be possible. That's the science guy. That's the technological guy. He's also the reason we were an hour late. No, he was not. No, he was not. I was the reason we were an hour late. And my sincere apologies and my sincere thanks to Brother Troy 5X. So thank you for listening. Until next Tuesday, Assalamu alaikum.